Howdy YouTube viewers and gear gadget fans everywhere. Thanks for tuning into another chapter of the WatchBox review today. In today's review we're taking a close look at the Invicta Ceramic Russian Diver, model number 1936. So I've owned this watch now for about a week, maybe a week and a half. And I don't normally do watch reviews this new out of box. But I've owned the other stainless steel model now for 6 years, and so I figured, oh, what the hell, I'm already so familiar with the overall form factor. So this is not a lefty. I wear my watches on my right hand simply because I'm a left-handed mouse user and I don't want to be dragging my watch buckle around the desktop. So this is shown on my right hand. My wrist is about 63, maybe 64 millimeters wide across. It's a very wide, flat case shape profile. There's basically not a lot of lug curvature or contour at all to this shape. Okay, some people have complained about the Russian Diver canteen cover, like digging into the backs of their wrists. So I'm gonna try put it on my left wrist and show you that. So I personally have never had a problem with that. My wrist joints are so rigid and they're just not flexible enough to really cause problems for me in that regard. So that's about as I'm really forcing my wrist, and that's as far back as my joint will flex, and I don't really have any problem with that. So there you have it. So let's take the watch off and go through the technical specs like you've seen me always do. So the bezel diameter across is 52 millimeters. The overall width, including the crown from the top of the canteen cover to the side of the case, is 63 millimeters. The lug end to lug end length is 62.5 millimeters. And it's a very wide, like I said earlier, very wide, flat case shape. The overall case thickness, or the height from the top of the bezel to the flat of the case back, is 15.5 millimeters. So it's overall not a very tall assembly. It sits very flat on the wrist and it's very comfortable. The canteen cap protrudes out from the side of the case by 13 millimeters, and it's a 13.5 millimeter diameter. And just so I can show you that, there's this little chain detail here that secures the cap so you don't lose it. Mainly for style points, just like the old stainless steel military canteens, with which the overall style has its origins. Okay, let's take a look here at the strap. The strap is a standard 26 millimeter wide lug width. There's two spring bars at each end, so two here, and that together rigidly mount the polyurethane rubber strap between the lugs. And the strap has a gradual taper from 26 millimeters down to 24 at the buckle. Two strap keepers on the end, and a familiar Invicta Russian Diver black ionic plated stainless steel buckle. There's a single spring bar in here to hold it together. And each strap has ceramic strap inserts or accents, whatever you want to call them. They're basically for style points. They serve really no functional purpose at all on both ends. There's a pair of screws on each end holding these barrel inserts together. You're going to want to make sure these screws are nice and tight. I've had multiple cases where, not so much on this watch, but my other one, my stainless steel one, I've had the case where the screws loosen over time without me really knowing it. Danger zone. So make sure these are nice and tight and you're good to go. Let's take a look at the other end. Here's the other end. This is probably where the most significant changes have occurred over the past few years in regards to the Invicta Russian Divers as a whole. Initially, when these were first released 6-7 years ago or so, the rubber straps were too short, and basically if you had a wrist circumference larger than 8 inches, you couldn't wear the watch. So, like I said before, my wrist, did I say before? I'm not sure. My wrist is about 7.5 millimeters in circumference, and I never really had a problem with this strap or the other one. So the new ones are longer, basically about 1.5 inches, about 1.25 inches longer. So let's see, on my right wrist, what did I say, 7.5 inch circumference. I wear the watch right about here, and I've got 4 holes left available. Sometimes I loosen it a little bit because it gets my wrists swell up in the summer, so I loosen it up a hole and it's more comfortable that way. Okay, so let's see, and there's the strap. We talked about the strap. So let's take a look at the case back. Here's your case back, a standard, pretty generic looking, well, no, Invicta Russian Diver, stainless steel screw-in case back. There's a rubber O-ring gasket that seals the case back to the stainless steel case itself. Okay, and like I said earlier, the canteen cover is also a screw mechanism, and it has a little O-ring gasket there at the base of the canteen cover. So the canteen cover, together with the screw and case back, achieve 10 ATMs of pressure resistance. Now there's also a pair of O-ring gaskets around the crown stem. So I don't know what the ATM pressure resistance rating is on the stem O-ring gaskets, but there is some degree of moisture resistance beyond the barrier created by this canteen cap. So when you wear the watch in the water, or when you're wearing it wherever, you want to make sure your canteen cover is nice and securely tightened. The O-ring that's around there makes good, solid, snug contact, snug fit with the cap, and you're good to go for water resistance and that type of thing. I have worn the watch at least 3 or 4 times in the pool, no problems there. Let's see, let's take a look here in the business end. Here's the front face of the dial. It's kind of dirty there, sorry about that, but there you go. It's a matte black dial with white luminescent painted markings around the circumference. The hands of the watch are polished stainless steel. They contrast very nicely, very boldly with that matte black dial. You can see the quartz movement ticking the second hand around the perimeter there. And the entire watch, everything that's on the dial that's white, glows blue with Invicta's Tritonite luminescent paint. And it's a pretty thick crystal over there, pretty thick crystal on the front overall. It's Invicta's Flame Fusion material, and good to go. So let's see, so that's pretty much it. The overall watch is basically glued together. Now don't let that alarm you. Okay, you're talking 2 different materials here, stainless steel and ceramic. So basically it's a puck-in frame or puck-in cradle type of design. So basically the sides of the case lugs on both ends, okay, form a cradle, and this stainless steel case back threads into a cylindrical puck basically, and that is what forms the water-resistant canister, so to speak. Now the front side of it, the Flame Fusion crystal presses down this way into the front of that puck, and together with the canister and the case back seal out water. And on top of it all, this ceramic bezel inserts over the top, and they glue it into place. How do I know all this? Well, simply because mine fell apart. Okay, one of the things I do when I first get a watch is I do a partial teardown. I'll unscrew the case back, re-lube the case gasket with enough silicone O-ring grease, and I'll also remove in this case, remove the cap, but I'll also pull the crown and lube up the O-rings that are around the crown stem as well, just to make sure I've got a good supply of grease in there, and make sure that these gaskets are snug and tight, and so I can wear the watch in the water as I so please. So I do wear my watches actively in the water. I'm not a diver, but I do wear them in the pool, wave pool parks, water slide parks, Pacific Ocean, that type of thing. And I do need some degree of water resistance, so I'll do a partial teardown, so to speak. And in the process of doing that, number one, the bezel came unglued and just kind of popped off. But number two, I was able to look once the bezel was off, I was able to look down into the puck in cradle design and kind of see how the parts kind of were pieced together. So that cradle is basically glued together inside the ceramic housing, and there's a bead of glue that goes around the perimeter, and they press the bezel over the top. So I was able to re-glue my bezel, no problem. My wife is into do-it-yourself jewelry making, and she recommended a particular adhesive that works well with gemstones and ceramics and things like that. So I went ahead and capitalized on that. In fact, you can probably see a little bit of glue, like extra, kind of around the perimeter there. Okay, that didn't come from the factory that way. That was yours truly doing a repair. So you can actually kind of see the inside wall around the, I guess, stadium, so to speak, around inside the dial. That stainless steel shine there is the actual brushed stainless of the puck assembly, so to speak. Okay, so let's pause it here and dim the lights, and we're going to take a look at the glow-in-the-dark features. Alrighty, we're back here. So you've all seen me do this before. Got my flashlight in hand, and we're going to lume charge a little bit here. So the reality here is my camera just doesn't do lume justice in any way, shape, or form. Basically, all my watches look significantly brighter than what you guys are seeing here on video, on film, simply because my camera can't capture faint amounts of light. Okay, so I don't really need to lume charge with a flashlight to be able to read this in the dark, but for the purposes of filming here, yes, I absolutely have to. So that being said, this is one of my dimmer glowing Invictas and one of my dimmest glowing watches overall in that sense. Now the flip side of it too is the dial is so bold and so easy to read, and the markings are so distinct against the black dial that you really don't need glow-in-the-dark luminescent to read the paint, to read the time, like in a movie theater or oncoming headlamp traffic at night when I'm driving, that type of thing. The luminescent properties only really take over in like the middle of the dark, when, you know, in the middle of the night when I wake up or whatever, and with fully night adapted vision, I can totally read the time here off the faint glow. So that's one thing to keep in mind here. So one of my minor lume peeves is when the hands glow significantly brighter than the rest of the dial, and that's a bit accentuated on my camera. I'm looking at the camera, I'm looking in frame here, and I'm actually seeing something a little bit more dramatically different than what I'm actually seeing. But still, you know, that's no different here. The hands do glow slightly brighter than the dial on this particular model. But that being said, it will glow long. Like I wake up, you know, like I said earlier, I wake up in the middle of the night and I can still very easily read the luminescent time in the middle of the dark, you know, once my eyes dilate. But it's also not my brightest glowing Invicta. That's too bad, really, because that blue lume is such a cool color, and it's so cool to look at. But unfortunately, I guess in this price range, you have to, you know, consider cost of manufacturing and cost of goods and things like that. So they had to cut corners, and I think that's one corner they may have cut a little bit compared to the other Russian divers, like my 43, 42 model that you saw. You know, the green. It's a green luminescent paint on that one, and it's really, it's much brighter. So. Okay, so I'm going to leave the camera turned around here and just talk to you this way. So, anyhow, we haven't really mentioned price at all. Gosh, I bought this watch used on eBay, and I'm really happy with it, honestly. The guy sold it to me for basically 55 bucks, shipped. I'm not going to complain about that. Can't complain about that at all, even though I did kind of have to go in and re-glue the ceramic bezel on it, but who cares, you know. I can excuse it for that. For me, you know, it's part of the beauty of owning watches is kind of taking care of them and tinkering with them and that kind of thing, I think. So that's kind of part of the fun, I guess I should say. But these watches typically sell for like $80 to like $150. I don't think I'd pay that much for it unless you really like the style. You know, start looking for price ranges around like what I paid, $55 to $85, maybe $90, and you've got a good deal there. So I've worn the watch actively. It's comfortable. It's lightweight. That was a shocker. It's very light compared to the stainless steel models. And, you know, with summer right around the corner, you know, this one's going to get a lot of time in the pool and a lot of time in the active summer months because it's so light and so comfortable. So, alrighty, that's pretty much it. That's all I can say about the ceramic Invicta Russian Diver, model number 1936. Thanks a lot, guys, for sitting this far through the review, and I'll catch you later.